Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for this really very kind welcome. It's great to be here at DigiCon 19 here in Dublin. I've always wanted to come to Dublin, being the great Irish-American push, and it's really welcome and fantastic. The weather is everything everybody told me it was going to be. So I want a special thanks to the organizers for their hospitality and providing me with the opportunity to spend a few minutes to have a conversation. And I want to tell you, this really should be a conversation about our industry. Now, I've been working in the industry probably 30 to 35 years. And most of my time in the industry has not been spent as an executive or as a consultant. I've been a project director or a project manager leading about $60 billion worth of work, both in the public sector and the private sector, in a lot of places around the world. And what I find is that we have a very, very, very dynamic industry. But it's a dynamic industry that is set on some very, very strong parameters on how business should be done and, for example, how projects should be run. But I tell you, my observation today is that we need to really look to change. I applaud everything I've heard today, both from the minister and about BIM, because I think that we're facing changes in our environment today, changes in our economies, where we as an industry are really going to have to change. And I want to bring up a couple of points as I come forward. Now, this presentation is a lot like my mother-in-law's Christmas gift. It's one of the first times I've ever seen it. So we're going to kind of work through this together. But, frankly, there is no question that our industry is essential to the world's economy. And we are actually poised to grow for the foreseeable future. Today, construction contributes to about 13% of the world's overall global GDP. Now, our research shows that there are going to be significant investment in gains across much of the world, as you can see here. And of that total construction market, Europe and the US represent about 40% of the growth. And in Ireland, there is despite the imbalance, there is a strong indication that there is some growth. There is some great growth there. However, the construction industry has some challenges with productivity. Historically, the growth in the construction labor productivity is lagging behind other sectors, even falling in recent years, while other sectors have experienced productivity surges. Factors that have boosted productivity in other industries include, in manufacturing, for example, total adoption of lean principles and extensive automation have boosted productivity. In retail, global supply chains, advanced distribution systems, and tailored customer intel gathering have also boosted productivity. Much of construction's poor productivity can be attributed to minimal digitization, extensive regulation, and a fragmented market that leads to underinvestment in skills development and research and development. These are really the three big areas. Construction productivity lags behind that of the total economy in every sector across the globe. For example, in the United States, total productivity in both construction and the greater economy leads every sector in the world, but the gap between construction and total economy productivities is greatest in both absolute and relative percentage terms. And as you can see on the chart here, you can see that there is where the constructor sector ranks in terms of the overall economies, but you can also see the loss in productivity, the economic value in loss due to the change in productivity. That is a gap that we could overcome. And here in Ireland, my information has that construction productivity is very flat. In fact, according to the CSO 218 report I read, the construction sector contributed very little to total productivity, this is a quote, over the entire period, and actually experienced negative labor productivity growth. Compounding this problem is we are a sector of several parts, but really two halves. You have very large contractors involved in industrial infrastructure, which have on average the highest productivity for the industry as a whole. followed by civil construction players and large-scale building contractors. However, trade subcontractors, and how many people are in firms in the audience that have under 50 people? Raise your hand. Quite a few. Under 25 people. Still quite a few. So in the trades, in our smaller firms, which are responsible for a large share of value in real estate and refurbishment and other such work, their productivity is typically about 20% lower than sector averages. Now, the higher productivity, large industry players are not immune from this productivity challenge because the large-scale players routinely subcontract to smaller specialized players. Therefore, any action to boost sector productivity needs to apply to the entire construction supply chain and to both parties of the market, each of which lags behind, for example, manufacturing, which you can see automobile manufacturing on the upper right-hand corner, which talks about its productivity and its productivity growth. So what are we going to do about it? What do we do about productivity? Well, we at McKinsey, and if those of you who are not familiar with McKinsey, we're a global consultant management firm, but I work in the capital infrastructure practice. So we spend an awful lot of time looking at the industry, advising clients, working on projects around the world, trying to help our clients. And whether that client is a government, whether that client is a developer, whether that client is an E&C firm, whether that client is a small contractor, helping them get more productive and optimize the potential of their work. So what are some of the things we can do to increase that productivity? Well, we've identified 7 ways innovative companies and regions are currently addressing these market failures and improving construction productivity, as well as cost and schedule reliability. Several of the items that the minister so eloquently spoke about, and it's some great objectives. With action and widespread adoption of all 7 of these, we believe our sector's productivity could go up globally 50 to 60%. Clearly, technology is the most powerful tool to produce construction productivity, to catch up to total economic productivity. This includes several things. Mobilize 5D BIM across the project life cycle, which we just spoke about, with augmented and mixed reality interfaces. Leverage the Internet of Things, enabled fully connected sites, for example, near-field communications, sensors, wearable devices, etc. Implement advanced analytics on project and firm-wide data. Develop alternative and innovative materials, and implement automation equipment on site. So this whole idea of technology intervention and technology innovation is very broad and can affect every single part of the industry. Now, for the last couple of years, we have been surveying the industry, and we're currently surveying about 2,400 companies across the globe to include at least 20 companies here in Ireland in that survey. And we're having some tremendous findings about how technology and digital technology is innovating itself into the industry. Our mapping shows that there's this sense of constellations of connected solutions that are emerging across established use cases. And these serve as indicators of what technologies are gaining the most traction and where their impact can be expected to rapidly increase in the near future. It basically shows where the work is happening and where the investment is happening. And that usually follows success. Today, the most prominent constellations include, for example, the purple, which is 3D printing, modularization, and robotics. We have digital twin technologies, which and virtual learning, which upper right-hand corner, artificial intelligence and analytics, and supply chain optimization in marketplaces. In the last decade, investment has doubled in these technologies across the globe. Our research has pointed not only to a greater volume of outside investment, but also an acceleration in that investment. Between 2008 and 2012, construction technology received $9 billion in cumulative investment. Between 2013 and February 2018, however, that number doubled to $18 billion. So we're really seeing change, we're seeing increased investment. Across the globe, this is starting to become the norms. So your competitors across the world are starting to really invest in technology in a big way. However, despite this growth, our industry is still underinvesting compared to other industries. And you can just see on the chart here, particularly the one on the far right, where construction sits in terms of percent of revenue invested in IT versus other industries. So we're still seeing a lagging investment and technology growth with respect to other industries. So that gap of productivity that we talked about, unless we see a change here, that gap in productivity will likely increase. And so we will continue to have the problems that the minister discussed. We'll continue to have late projects. We'll continue to have projects that are over budget. For example, mega projects worldwide are typically 70% late and 60% over budget. That's the norm. And a lot of that is due to the lack of it. It's due to many factors, but significantly, it's due to a lack of technology as something that could really help turn those projects around. But I clearly recognize the reality to embracing technology can be challenging. It's easy for me to stand up here and say, hey, just go out and buy it, right? Just go do it and put it in, it's great. You know, I've been on enough projects, and I've been on enough programs, and I have received technology downloads from people enough time that say, hey, use this, Chris. It's great. As a matter of fact, I'm demanding you use this and make it effective. I have a whole bunch of workers, many senior guys, okay, I'm not 25 anymore, okay, who, in fact, I still remember how to use a slide rule, who really don't have a tradition of embracing technology. I didn't grow up with a lot of this stuff, right? You have clients who might not know how to use it. You have subcontractors you're working with who might not know how to use it. So how do you craft this digital journey? You know, I had a conversation at dinner the other day with a good friend of mine who runs a small engineering firm, fairly successful, in Springfield, Massachusetts. And we were talking about BIM. And I said, Bob, do you use BIM? He said, yes, we use BIM. In fact, it's mandated by this one large company we're working. I go, how do you like it? He goes, we do it because we have to. But at the end of the day, then the guys just go out and work it out anyway. And so we had a very long discussion on how if we spent a little bit of time just training his senior folks who have been doing this for a long time and who he's been working with for 30 years, how they could then do a lot of their work. And we were talking very specifically about identifying clashes rather than going out to the field, but identifying clashes before you build. I mean, it's a very simple thing to do with BIM, but highly effective, saves a lot of time, saves a lot of money. And it was an idea that he had not really thought about. So I think this idea of how do we make digital real and how do we make it something that we can use, I think is something we really need to all think about. You know, the digital market is also highly fragmented, with more than half the companies who have digital tools have only one or two specific use cases. So they haven't fully embraced digital. So how do we get there? What do we do? Well, I just want to talk about three different pieces to help us here. First, I'm going to talk quickly about companies need to have a plan for a journey on how they invest in digital to add value, because this is all about adding value. If you can't add value, then it's just another thing that you have, all right? The next thing I want to talk about is this idea of risk and rebalancing risk. And where is the risk on digital innovation, and where should it sit? And then lastly, and this really segues in, or ties very close to what the minister was saying, I really agree with everything he was saying, what governments can do, and what governments are doing across the globe to go ahead and create opportunities. So let's talk about this for a few minutes. First of all, any company, no matter what size, that is going to embark on a digital journey needs to really think about 3 steps, okay? And we often find that in our work that many firms are really challenged to begin the digital journey. Like, where do I start? Often involves someone basically buying a tool and then saying, use this, okay? We need to really change our approach, and we need to get strategic about it. So the very first step, in my view, is to set up and establish a strategic direction. What are the priorities of the company? Don't pick the tool. Figure out where the company needs to be, right? Where does the company need to be? Where do you want to go in the industry? The tool will then follow. The tools will follow, okay? Then there's an issue of project enablement. We've found that the most success is when, once the strategic direction is identified and once the use cases are identified, then selected projects are then picked and used as pilots. So select those projects, use them as pilots, extract the lessons learned, and then move on to the rest of the enterprise. Now, one of the things that really helps with a digital transformation is this idea of agile and lean construction. Agile and lean combined with digital really makes for an effective execution and makes the digital transformation that much more effective. And then lastly, need to consider, and it's probably not the last thing you do, but you really need to look at, do you have the talent base, and do you need to really re-look some of your positions, or maybe even add a position that is going to allow you to have people with the digital skills who are going to be able to use that technology. Sometimes it involves a degree of retraining. Sometimes that involves a degree of refocusing. But sometimes that degree, involves new people. But we really need to take a look at that and look at the organization. I think companies need to do a very honest answer of where they are in their digital journey. Are they currently, do they have a limited investment? Do they have a midstream investment where they have some degree of digital capability, some investment, and they have some basic technology? Like everybody runs Primavera. I mean, that's an example, right? But I've been in parts of the world where they don't have Primavera, and you don't have P6. And you're still using yellow sheets of paper, and you're using some really different products which are really challenging to integrate. And then, as you become more digitally capable, are you in a position to have that large investment? And I think, as I continue to look at this, there are some definite questions that companies need to ask themselves. And I'm just covering through these very quickly. We can cover more in the Q&A. I just want to hit upon 3. I alluded to this one earlier. First, what is the value at stake? What is the value at stake? And by the value at stake, what projects can you not do? What projects are you excluded from? Where are you losing money from a degree of productivity? As I talk to companies around the world, I'm working with a company in the United States right now that has seen their profits fall. Their profits fall from over 15% to less than 1% on various jobs. A lot of that has to do with inefficiencies. It's inefficiencies that crept up on them. But part of the problem was getting a very clear understanding of where they stood and where their margins really were. And then we can go ahead and take a look at the value that's going to be at stake. Next, what digital solutions can be tied to that value. You know? And I am really a big fan of ensuring that you get value out of the digital solutions. If it doesn't show value, you might not want to consider using it. And then lastly, the third of these has to do, I believe, with this idea of organization, infrastructure and organization. Unless, at the end of the day, our entire organization starts reflecting these new technologies, the technologies will always be kind of these one-off niche items that are really going to be hard to bring into the enterprise and really be hard to optimize. The next area to consider is this idea of risk. And our industry has a risk imbalance, okay? At the end of the day, my observation is that we are often asking contractors to bear the risk of innovation, and they have the lowest room to bear that risk. The lowest room to bear that risk, okay? Does this mean contractors should not invest in innovation? No, but it's harder for them to extract value. So we recommend that those who can shoulder the risk do so. There are 3 actions that really owners and developers can take who are in a great position to shoulder the risk. They can enforce a strong and shareable data foundation, all project participants to work on one shared data backbone in one system, kind of this common data environment. They can align on supportive contract strategies, for example, integrated project delivery, which can not only improve outcomes and accountability, but also circumvent kind of the hostility that we have in a various adversarial contractual environment. That's something we can talk about later. And this idea of identifying and focusing on critical use cases. And owners and developers need to focus on understanding the unique economic case for the technology and then helping the contractors share that burden. And I believe government, as an owner and developer, can bear some of that risk. This gives you an idea of the amount of spending, and I didn't write down the figures that were spoken earlier, but you know, in the United States, public infrastructure spending has reached $344 billion in 2018. That's in non-residential public realm. Okay, that's bridges, power plants, government installations, military installations, all of those things. And I want to talk about the role of government very briefly in about the minute I have left, because government is both the owner and a developer. Government can take, I believe, 5 major activities or initiatives to catalyze change. They can set bold and I've heard many of these today. They can set bold aspirations, establish a digital strategy with clear targets. They can create meaningful incentives. For example, leveraging the tendering process and grants, having an advantage to those who are going to go ahead and use the digital tools. They can help managing risk by rethinking innovation guidelines, for example, integrated project delivery. They can continue to increase transparency. In a lot of places I've been, particularly in the public realm, if you go, for example, to New York City, in the Department of Transportation, all the DOT projects and all the key metrics of the projects are up on the web. So you can access that, all right? And they can also help by building capabilities in terms of government-sponsored training. And governments can support key enablers also. And we've covered several of these, but I do want to come back to this idea of integrated project delivery, because I believe this idea of integration is clearly a strong thread which kind of wraps itself into this digital environment. We need to move from an environment of value for service to an idea of shared risk, shared data, and shared incentives. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you very much. I think I am going to take a seat, and I'll be available for questions following my colleague's discussion. Thank you very much.